Joining me now, Ben Wittes. He's a senior fellow at Brookings, editor-in-chief of Lawfare, and now, we like to say, an NBC News and MSNBC legal analyst. Nobody lives and breathes this investigation better than you, I think. Good luck with that.
Thanks.
All right. All right, let's start. Significance. I want to break things down. Significance that we are closer on the obstruction of justice thing. If you're zeroing in on an interview with him, it means he thinks he has all the information he needs to finally question the president who may be here. How do you read this in? Does it mean that part of the investigation is coming to a close?
Well, so I think there's two possible, and maybe more, but at least two possible ways to read it. One is to say, look, you interview the principal at the end of an investigation. Think of the obstruction investigation as a relatively discrete part of the Mueller investigation. We know from other news reporting today that he interviewed Comey and Jeff Sessions, who are other principals in these interactions. And now he wants to interview the president, that could really be a sign that the Mueller investigation, on this point anyway, is wrapping up. The other way to look at it is that this is a big, sprawling mess of an investigation. And as Carol indicated, sometimes you do interviews in the middle of things, get people on the record, right, and then see what other leads that may open up.
You and I were talking beforehand about, I said, is it possible there are sort of 3 or 4 separate subparts of the investigation? He's a large special counsel, but you've got obstruction of justice. You've got the Trump organization. Perhaps he's already got a Paul Manafort angle. Maybe there's a Jared. There's all sorts of. How many sort of separate, narrow investigations could there be under this umbrella of Mueller?
So it depends how you mean the word separate, but let's assume that these are at least...
Use the Ken Starr. Let's go back. Ken Starr had a similar issue, right?
So, well, Ken Starr had totally different, discrete investigations. He had an FBI files matter. He had a White House travel office matter. He had the underlying Whitewater matter, and he had the Monica Lewinsky matter. These were separate investigations.
But he would close one out while still have others open.
And
That's the point.
He even had final reports on some of them. So these investigations, I think, are a bit more integrated than that. They're related. But I think there are at least 3 or 4 different clusters. So one is the underlying collusion question, right? Was there cooperation between Russia and anybody in the Trump campaign? Mm-hmm. One is a set of underlying business transactions that they've clearly taken a look at. Now, the relationship there is that if you're doing these business transactions that involve large amounts of Russian or Central Asian money, that could be a form of leverage that then plays in the campaign. So it's not that they're unrelated, but they're presumably at least somewhat separate clusters of investigative material. Third area is the bad acts by individuals who are associated with the campaign. So, for example, Paul Manafort gets indicted for a whole lot of money laundering.
That has nothing to do with the initial part, but they found crimes.
Right, they found crimes, right? And then, of course, the other 2 people who were prosecuted, other than Manafort's co-defendant, are both charged with lying to the investigators, which are sort of discrete bad acts in the course of investigating these other things. And then the final element is the obstruction stuff. And I think you can think of those as 4 discrete baskets of activity.
All right, I want to talk about the Christopher Wray news here. We have the president denying that Christopher Wray threatened a resignation, but it's in the denial. Like a White House statement sort of reaffirmed this idea that the president does want to change in senior leadership and does believe these were political actors. Does that statement in itself reinforce the obstruction? I don't want to say charge, but obstruction, analysis here?
So whether it's obstruction or not is a criminal question, and I think that's probably the wrong rubric. The right rubric to understand it is this is a completely unacceptable way for the president to be interacting with his senior law enforcement leadership. And, and we don't actually, it doesn't actually matter what the White House said last night. We know that the president is demanding Andy McCabe's head because the president tweets about it on a, regular basis.
Yes.
He evidently hates Andrew McCabe. And by the way, the reason he hates him seemed to be that Andy McCabe is married to a Democrat. Right. I am also married to a Democrat. Don't consider that the worst crime in the world.
Who once stood next to Terry McAuliffe.
Yes, that's right.
Don't forget, who then knows the Clintons, who then, of course, we see where this could, I've never seen somebody sort of pilloried the way this deputy FBI director has been pilloried with no evidence. It's McCarthyism.
It is one of the most appalling spectacles I can remember, just in terms of the president reaching down within the bureaucracy in order to attack a career FBI agent. It's an astonishing thing, and it's astonishing that it's not more scandalous.
It's astonishing that more people aren't astonished.
Exactly.
Right. Yes.
And look, as to Chris Wray, I think we did learn something very important about Chris Wray last night when Axios broke that story, which is that this is somebody who, at the end of the day, is working to protect the institutional integrity of the FBI. That doesn't mean he hasn't made mistakes. It doesn't mean he's wedged in an impossible position. And, you know, I'm not going to sit here and say I support every single thing he's done, but I think that was a very encouraging thing.
How do you view these text messages, which are, it feels like it's becoming sort of this almost holy, this sort of mythical holy grail of, I think, missing information that some of the president's supporters are hoping somehow is going to prove that it's the Clintons that created this whole thing?
Look, I have no reason, government documents do not always get preserved as they are supposed to be preserved. I have no doubt that, if messages disappeared that are not supposed to be, they're supposed to be available, we should find out what happened there and verify that there was no misconduct in the in illicit destruction of those messages. The story here is not about Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. They were removed from the investigation the moment Bob Mueller learned that there was an issue.
Right.
And this is a mammoth effort to distract from what this investigation is actually about.
All right, Ben Wittes, I'm going to leave it there. It's good to have you on board, by the way.
Thanks. It's good to be here.
And which also means I'm going to make you be on set a lot more often. Sorry, brother.
Anytime.
All right. Ben Wittes, thanks very much.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.